What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Wednesday edition of the Stokastic NHL Strategy Show. I am your host, Josh Harris. Joining me, as always, my partner in crime, Slim Cliffy. How are we doing today, Cliffy?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Real nice day outside. Nice outside to get for a run and get a little exercise in. Suppose we should talk about last night. I dropped in the Discord. I was thankful to get a little over half my entries back, considering how much St. Louis and New Jersey I had. They really, St. Louis especially, they really fell on their face last night. Did have some Winnipeg one lines that carried me into the cash with a few of my entries, but nothing too special. I did notice, of course, our boss, Mr. Harry, who was kind enough to join us yesterday on the strategy show, finished third in the big $20 on DK last night. Good night from him, especially with the flatter payouts. Those flatter payouts definitely help. So congrats to him. Not a great night for myself. How about you?
I just want to, pour a little bit of salt in the wound on Jake there. He got passed by 0.1 points by a quick shutout at the end. He would have won 20 grand there. Now he's going to have to come on, do a fridge reveal, maybe start an OnlyFans. But I don't know. I was in a good spot last night. I had Ottawa 1. I had Jordan Eberle, had Hellebuck in net. Then I had well-owned Minnesota. I had Joe Eriksson, Matt Boldy, Kirill Kaprizov. Did nothing. So,
yeah. Kaprizov was the big one. We liked the power play spot for Minnesota last night. They got one power play in the entire game, considering Los Angeles was giving up 4 to the opponent. That was a pretty big deviation from what we expected. And Kaprizov got kicked out. He cross-checked Drew Doughty. It looked like he missed his face, but, they called it a match penalty in real time. Got kicked out, I think, halfway through the second period. So anybody with Minnesota power play, if you stayed up until 1 o'clock in the morning to watch that game, kind of wasted your time a little bit. But just to jump into the news real quick, came out a little earlier that Kaprizov is getting fined and not suspended. Minnesota's on the slate tonight, so he'll be in the lineup, and barring something crazy happening. But it looks like he'll be back in the lineup tonight, which is good news. At least we have a little bit of clarity on that front.
Yeah, a lot of teams on a back-to-back tonight on this 4-gamer. And as always, we're sponsored by BetMGM. We have a great promo for you later. But before we get into this slate, please give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows. We had 2 yesterday. Maybe we'll have 2 during NBA All-Star break. It was a lot of fun. I was actually really tired after. But, you can keep up with our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our show goes live. As I see all of you here already, you probably have notifications on. Don't forget, most of our content is available in podcast form on the platform of your choice, except for Live Before Locks. Help us out by leaving a 5-star review. Now, we have a 4-game slate tonight. All of these games are a 6.5 total. Some are trending to 7. We got some backup goalies in net. We have 8 teams playing tonight. We have 3 teams on back-to-backs. So everything in play here tonight. So let's jump into the first game. Seems like a fun one. We have the Carolina Hurricanes with a 3.3 total heading into Florida. The Panthers have also a 3.3 total. Spencer Knight confirmed for the Panthers. No one confirmed for the Hurricanes. Lineup Builder says Antti Ranta. I don't know if Freddie, I didn't see news, but if Antti Ranta was in the starter's crease, he's probable today.
Yeah, Freddie's hurt. Ranta's starting. They called up that Peter Chekhov guy. So I think they said Anderson might be out for a little while. So could be Ranta's net for the next little bit.
Yeah, they could use someone like Nedeljkovic, who they gave up for nothing, but that's neither here nor there.
I mean, he's not doing very well in Detroit.
Yeah, but yeah,
it's Husso season, baby.
Yeah, it's Husso's better. Husso is better. But anyway, interesting lines for the Panthers here. We got Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Colin White. I'm a Colin White guy. I was hoping he would see some power play one time because a lot of the Florida power play guys are net fronts, and Colin White shoots the puck, which I think would help their power play. But anyway, on the second line is Ryan Lomberg, Anton Lundell, Sam Reinhart. Sam Reinhart finally broke through with a few goals. Lastly, you had a little interesting nugget on Ryan Lomberg, which we'll get to. Third line of E2, D2, Luosterainen, Sam Bennett, and Nick Cousins. Status quo for the Hurricanes.
I mean, just to jump in, we think it's status quo. They haven't practiced. I think they played Sunday on the road. I mean, they practice, but I haven't seen any lines from beat writers, and they completely nuked their lines. Well, not nuked them. They changed up the centers. Moved Sebastian Aho between Svechnikov and Necas in the third period of their last game. Don't know if they're going to go back to that. We won't know until warm-ups. At least it's the first game to lock on the slate, or one of the first games. So we'll know before lock, but as of right now, we don't have 100% confirmation on the lines, at least not that I've seen.
Yeah. And looking at ownership, like if Svechnikov and Necas are together, they're pretty low-owned power play combo here. Spencer Knight, I like Spencer Knight. I think his struggles are on the penalty kill. Florida doesn't have a great penalty kill as it is. Pretty heavy ownership on the Florida top 2 lines here. Some ownership on the supposed Carolina one. I think there's stuff to like on both sides here.
Yeah, there is a lot to like. Of course, that new Florida top line without Makachuk being suspended. As you mentioned, it's Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Colin White. We should mention a little bit about Colin White. He was a relatively high esteemed prospect for Ottawa when they drafted him. They drafted him in, I think, the middle of the first round back in 2015. Don't quote me on that, but injuries have definitely derailed his career. In 2 seasons, 2021, he missed 11 games or something like that. He missed 2/3 of the season last year. So it was a couple seasons where he got injured, and we don't really have a lot of data from what he did because there just aren't a lot of games. But what I do want to mention is that earlier in his career back in Ottawa, he was pretty good in transition, like good zone exit and good zone entry numbers. And that was on a pretty bad Ottawa team. If anybody can think back to those Ottawa teams from like 4 years ago, definitely, I mean, they're 4-8 this year, but they should be a little bit better, but that's neither here nor there. But he was pretty good in transition, and that's exactly the type of player that I could see fitting in well with Barkov and Verhaeghe. We mention it pretty much every show, but it doesn't really matter who Barkov and Verhaeghe play with. They still have a pretty good line. Now, this year has been a little bit different. In 85 minutes without Makachuk, Barkov and Verhaeghe, only 2.6 expected goals for, 1.3 actual goals at 5-on-5 per 60 minutes. That's a pretty big deviation from what they had historically done. I was looking at their numbers from Verhaeghe's first 2 seasons in Florida, nearly 1,000 minutes together, without Huberdeau, without Tkachuk, without Mason Marchment, like without those top wingers, like with just normal wingers, 3.3 expected goals, 3.4 actual goals. Barkov has been pretty snake bit this year, is one of the reasons why their goals for is down so much at 5-on-5. Barkov still shooting 0% at 5-on-5 a month into the season, which feels kind of unfathomable until you realize that Sam Reinhart just scored his first 2 goals of the season on Monday. But Barkov, last year had 23 even strength goals in 67 games, almost 1 every 3 games. Him having none is, pretty shocking, actually. It's going to turn around eventually. It's just how much does it turn around and when does it start? Those are the, big questions here, and we just don't have an answer to that. But I do think White will fit in well with that top line here for the Florida Panthers. And he's not that expensive. So that top line isn't very expensive. Whether you're looking on DraftKings, a little over $17K, FanDuel, a little over $18K, not very expensive, probably going to be fairly highly owned. Probably one of the 3 or 4 highest owned lines on the slate here tonight. But I think more than just noting Colin White being good in transition, it's noting Carter Verhaeghe's move to the power play. You say you want White on the power play. For me, it's Verhaeghe that I've been clamoring for on the top power play unit for like 2 years now. Like it just seems like he has that skill set. Good in transition, good with the puck in the zone, knows how to get open for shots. Like a real dual threat guy who's done very well production wise at 5-on-5 over the last 3 years. Just doesn't get the power play time. And now he is getting the power play time. I'm kind of excited to see what they do. And I know Florida's power play hasn't been very good, but it's been better of late since they got away from that 5-forward unit and started using Brandon Montour on the top power play unit as a defenseman. So I do think their power play will be a little bit better. We don't know exactly how well that line's going to mesh with White, but my assumption is that he's going to fit in relatively seamlessly. I don't expect them to be like a powerhouse top line like they would be with Tkachuk, but I still think they'll be good. The second line is actually what's really interesting for me here from Florida: Lundell, Reinhart, and Lomberg. I am going to start with Anton Lundell. I had some concerns how he would perform this year without Mason Marchment because they played a lot together over the last year. Him and Marchment were pretty much staples on the third line together. But Lundell doing very well for Florida down there on that third line. If you want to look at defensive impacts, he has one of the best on the team so far this season. Like they're doing a really good job of limiting opposition's chances. And he and Sam Reinhart typically played well together. Going back to last year, again, without Mason Marchment, 3.1 expected goals for, 3.3 actual goals for per 60 minutes. They're really crushing the opposition in a smaller sample this year, but I just wanted to include last year because they have played very, very well together offensively. And Ryan Lomberg to round it out. Lomberg's not somebody that we typically pay attention to in DFS because he has been a fourth liner pretty much his entire career. But he does score, which is the surprising thing. If you go back over the last 3 seasons, now 3 seasons for Lomberg, remember he's playing fourth line minutes and we're talking about just a little over 100 games. So it's not a huge sample of minutes. But Lomberg has the same goal rate at 5-on-5 as other wingers like David Perron, Lucas Raymond, Artemi Panarin. Like he's at worst been a middle of the league scorer, playing very low minutes for the Florida Panthers. So I'm kind of interested to see how he mixes in here on that second line with Florida. Now, it obviously is a tough matchup, and they are coming in with a ton of ownership. Like our FanDuel ownership has this Florida second line over 20%. It's because Lomberg and everybody else is really so cheap. That's a kind of an issue here. Like I don't want to play a 20% Florida second line. So people on FanDuel will have a little bit of a decision to make. I think you might be fine just kind of mixing and matching here. Throw in Barkov instead of Lomberg to get an extra power play stack. Just leave the trio and add Montour on the blue line or Forsling on the blue line or something like that if you're really that worried about ownership. But it is a pretty tough matchup going up against that either of the Carolina top lines. In fact, all the top three lines for Carolina have been pretty good defensively so far this year. Carolina 1, 2.1 expected goals against per 60 minutes, well below league average. Carolina 2, sitting at 1.7, which is well below league average. Carolina 3, even further down, 1.1 expected goals against per 60 minutes. Like, that's Carolina lineup has been really, really good defensively. So it's just a matter of, like, I think Ranta's not as good as Anderson. It's whether Florida can kind of generate at home against what is a really good Carolina lineup. On the other side, again, assuming they're going back to their old lines with Jarvis and Teravainen and Aho on the top line and so on down, I do want to mention Seth Jarvis here. He was a guy that I thought would have that breakout season this year because some of his underlying numbers last year were really good. But one thing I checked, there's a guy on, I call him a guy, but he's a game tracker on Twitter named Corey Snaster. He manually tracks hundreds of NHL games across every team every year. Still a small sample this year. We're looking at just 75 minutes of games tracked, but Jarvis's scoring chance contributions down 30% from last year. Almost all of it coming from scoring chance assists, which means he's not looking for his teammates as much as he was last year, at least through the first month of the season. And if he could score goals a ton, I would take that instead of, just racking up assists because one's worth way more than the other in the fantasy game. But the problem is he's playing, 14, 15, maybe 17 minutes in some games. That, secondary power play time, that's really not a great situation, to break out offensively. So I do have concerns about that Carolina top line. Again, they're coming in with reasonable ownership, at least over on DK, FanDuel, a little bit higher. It would probably be dipping down to the Carolina second line here for me. Kotkaniemi, Necas, and Svechnikov. By those same scoring chance contributions, Svechnikov and Necas top 20 amongst all forwards in the league so far this year. Those guys have been absolutely dynamite. They're shooting pretty highly at 5-on-5, 20%. So that's obviously going to come down a bit. But Svech is also generating a ton on the power play. That is kind of important here in this matchup. Florida, one of the 10 most penalized teams in the NHL, tied for 8th actually with the Anaheim Ducks. So some sort of Carolina power play stack, I think, makes sense to me here, especially when we're talking about the goaltending. We'll get to that in a second, but I think it's a Carolina power play stack. Just, you worry about lines mixing up. You worry about maybe some tough in-game matchups or something like that. I think it would be the Carolina power play I would attack. I'd even throw in Stefan Nason. Their power play has been pretty good with Nason on the top PP unit. 11.8 expected goals for, 14.5 actual goals for per 60 minutes with him there. You said it on the last show we had with Carolina, I think. Maybe he's the next Alex Chason that can really help. A guy that comes out of nowhere from the fourth line to really help the top power play unit. So for me in this game, it's Florida 2 if you want to. I think I would just go to Florida 1 and just kind of, get what I think is the easiest matchup against the Carolina top line. On the Carolina side, it would be some sort of power play stack here. I think you want to take advantage of a Florida team that can take a lot of penalties. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'll mention Carolina 3 as well. Those guys have been absolute monsters this year. Jordan Martinook, through 1 month of the season, one of the most impactful players by expected goals impacts in the league. And they're generating a ton at 5-on-5. So even if you just want to one-off Jordan Martinook or something like that, I think that's fine, especially where he's playing 14 to 16 minutes of late. Don't mind dipping all the way down to Carolina 3, getting to that what could be meager depth of the Florida Panthers. So Florida 1, Carolina power play, Carolina 3 for me.
Yeah, I think, some sort of Carolina power play stack is probably my favorite from this game. I think Svechnikov Netchis is my favorite pair. You want to take out Kotkaniemi and put in Aho. I think that's fine. It's expensive, but there are some cheaper lines that you can fit in. I think Florida's fine. I just think, without Tkachuk, without, Aaron Ekblad, who should be back on Saturday. I mean, Montour has been excellent. So, the one good thing about, Ekblad getting hurt, it shows how good the other, Panthers defensemen are. But I don't know. I'm on the Carolina side here. Same total, a little bit lower ownership. Carolina has a very good PK, whether, Freddie is the better goalie, but I'd rather rely on Carolina power play where Spencer Knight has struggled mightily on the PK. So let's move to the blue line, then we'll get to goalies. Brandon Montour, 7,200. Still, it sounds silly to say, but he's been excellent. I think, you don't have to include him. I think he's more of a one-off type deal for me. Brett Burns on the other side, power play quarterback, is also fine. Punt-wise, they're just not too much. I think Brett Pesci's fine. Other than that, Slavin if you're in no man's land.
Yeah, I think Pesci's price on DraftKings is pretty palatable, so I don't mind him there. Forsling has been shooting a lot of late. I think his 6K price is kind of fine, especially if you're worried about the Carolina penalty kill. He doesn't get those top minutes, so you don't have to worry about that. One guy I will mention is Radko Gudas. His DK and FanDuel price, I think, are a little bit high to the point where it's not great value, but he is playing 20-ish minutes. And he is a guy, we have seen him get, monster block games, especially against a high volume team like Carolina. He definitely will shoot the puck. And he's coming in with almost no ownership. I think that's the one thing I wanted to mention is that the Florida defensemen are easily well into the double digits, except for Gudas down at 1%, which a lot has to do with his price. But there aren't really a ton of super expensive players here tonight. I mean, you have the Pittsburgh top line, you have Kaprizov in Minnesota, but if you're not playing those lines, I think a 4,500 Gudas on DK is, passable on a 4-game slate where he's coming in at 1%.
Yeah. I mean, the key to short slates are always the defenseman you put in your lineup. You can have the best wingers and centers. If you have the wrong defenseman, you're going to go from top 10 to 200 in MME fields. So getting your defenseman right on a, fairly short slate is important. I think that's a nice way to get different. In net, Spencer Knight, I think I would reserve him for Florida lineups only. I like Antti Raanta here. Goalie is just an absolute mess tonight. So 7,600 on DK. Good defensive team in front of him. Good penalty kill in front of him. I think Raanta is the preferred option for me.
So I'm going to say Spencer Knight. And I do want to get to that point that we mentioned earlier. I was talking about it in our Discord. He has 1,800 minutes to his name at 5-on-5 since he stepped into the league. The only goalie with a better high danger save percentage at 5-on-5 than Spencer Knight since he came into the league, with at least that many minutes played, is Igor Shesterkin. Knight is ahead of Sorokin, he's ahead of Saros, he's ahead of Hellebuck, he's ahead of all of those guys. The reason Knight's save percentage overall looks pretty bad is he's getting blasted on the penalty kill. I think it's the 5th worst penalty kill save percentage among all regular goalies over the last 3 years. So that's one reason why I kind of like the Carolina power play. Maybe it's something that doesn't persist. Could be something just with the team system. Could just be small sample noise. It's still only about 200 minutes on the penalty kill, which is about one full season's worth. But that's also why I kind of like Knight in this game. I think if he doesn't get lit up by the Carolina power play, he could have a pretty good game against a team that shoots a lot. So I kind of like Knight here, I think.
Yeah. I mean, listen, all goalies are in play tonight. There isn't one option where it's just like, well, I think you have to consider everybody. Yeah, so my lean's on Ronta, but I think Knight is definitely in play as well. We are sponsored by BetMGM, and we have a very, very good deal for you. Get 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum and up to $1,000 risk-free bet when you sign up. Make a deposit and make your first paid wager at BetMGM. So I know a lot of people sometimes are on the fence about doing these types of things. There's literally no strings attached to this one. You follow these steps, you get what I'm telling you. And I've been told that it's going to go from 2 months down to 1 month free of Stokastic Plus Platinum soon. So there is no better time than now. And I'll tell you how to do it. You create a free Stokastic membership using the form below. Or if you have a membership already, as a lot of you do, just log in. And then you click the large BetMGM button that appears after registering or logging in. Then you have to complete the steps of BetMGM. Very simple there. Then you create a BetMGM Sportsbook account, just a couple steps there, and deposit at least $10. Then you make your first paid bet. After your bet settles, you qualify for 2 free months of Stokastic Platinum. It is easy as that. So if you deposit 10 and you bet it, when you lose, you get the $10 back. To get the $1,000 risk-free bet, you have to deposit and bet the $1,000. But after you completed all those steps, you'll receive an email from BetMGM Sportsbook with instructions for redeeming your 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. And remember, no strings attached. After, I don't know when it's going to be, but it's going to be soon. It's going down to 1 free month Stokastic Plus Platinum. So there is honestly no better time than meow. Let's move on to the next game of the night. We have the Vancouver Canucks back-to-back on the road heading to Montreal. Canadians also played last night. Vancouver has a 3.5 or 3.6 total. Montreal has a 3 total. Demko confirmed. Jake Allen went last night. That game went to a shootout. So I would imagine Samuel Montembeault is going to be in net tonight. Not overwhelmingly high ownership on either side here. Obviously, Vancouver, too, with the 3.6 total, is garnering the most. Montreal top line, a little bit right around double digits. The second line, around 5%. The one thing I will say about the second line, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here, I think the second line is fine, but the game went to a shootout last night, and those guys played 11 minutes. They got there in those 11 minutes, but they played only 11 minutes, and it went to a shootout. So I think this is another game where you have to consider stuff on both sides.
Yeah, I agree. I'll start with the Montreal side. The biggest, well, I shouldn't say the big, well, I think the biggest weakness of Montreal top lines, Caulfield, Suzuki, typically had been their defense. Since adding Kirby Dach there, it's gotten their line defense has gotten significantly better. 2.1 expected goals against per 60 minutes. That's well below league average. Now it's still 60 minutes of ice time. That's maybe 5 or 6 games worth. It's still not a whole lot to go off of, but it is a step in the right direction, and it kind of jives with the way Suzuki played in the first 5 or 6, or the way Dach had played in the first 5 or 6 games of the season. One thing I worry about with Montreal is just wildly unsustainable percentages. Like Nick Suzuki shooting 31% at 5-on-5. Like if he shot half that, it would be an amazing shooting season.
And he's not shooting that much either.
No, his all situations shot attempts are down. That's a pretty big concern for me. Now, obviously, they're going into Vancouver. Vancouver, not a great defensive team. So not a huge concern, but to kind of rely on Suzuki, I would like to see more shooting from him. But again, we have a pretty short slate, so they have to at least be in consideration. They're not coming in with much ownership. 10% at home for a top line, perfectly correlated on a 4-game slate seems perfectly fine to me. So I don't mind Montreal 1 here. They're going to be going up against that Vancouver top line. And the top line, I mean the JT Miller, Brock Besser line. Now, going back to January 1st of last year, just after Bruce Boudreau was hired, they actually don't have bad numbers together. A little bit above water by expected goal share. The problem is Besser's not getting his power play role back, at least not right now, from Andrei Kuzmenko. And it's something else we talked about in the Discord this morning. Brock Besser has 3 games with at least 2 even strength goals in his last 241 games, I think it is, like 3 seasons, full seasons worth of games. He has 3 with multiple even strength goals. For reference, I think 4 in 241 games. Cole Caulfield has 3 in like his last 45 games. We talk about it over and over how reliant Vancouver is on the power play. There aren't many guys that are more reliant than Brock Besser. I think over the last 4 years, like 40% of his goals have come with the power play. That's a lot. And he's only been playing, 14, 15, 16 minutes without that power play time. It's really not that significant. So I don't mind playing Vancouver 1 here tonight because they aren't coming in with much ownership. We have them at 6% on DraftKings, 9 to 10% on FanDuel. That's perfectly fine, especially against a Montreal team that struggles a lot on the power play. You do get JT Miller on the power play. I think the way I would go about it is if I'm using the top line from Vancouver, I would probably leave off one of Pearson or Besser and then add in a Bo Horvat or add in an Elias Pettersson or add in an Andrei Kuzmenko or something like that. I would get more pieces of the power play because Montreal's penalty kill is really bad. They're being bailed out by the 6th best penalty kill save percentage in the NHL. It's over 900 right now. So that's kind of the way that I'm approaching Vancouver in this game is like JT Miller's not really shooting much at 5-on-5. We just went over how Brock Besser has really struggled to score at even strength over the last, 3+ seasons now. I just think that if Vancouver's going to smash, it would probably be on the power play. And I'm not saying, that Tanner Pearson can't score or Brock Besser can't score or anything like that. That's why they're fine to use, I think, in a line stack. I would get some additional power play exposure. Like I said, add a Pettersson, add a Bo Horvat. Good call on Bo Horvat yesterday, by the way. You brought up how much he'd been scoring over the last, over his last 40 games or something like that. And he goes out and double dongs. So, maybe you want to keep it going with Bo Horvat. I would just, if I use Vancouver 1, which I think is fine to use, because like I said, the numbers are good, not great, but good. I think I would probably just add some additional power play guys to it. That's, it's a short enough slate where something like that can easily work out. So I would add, like I said, add a Pettersson, add a Horvat, something like that. That's the way I would treat them. Vancouver too, like they just keep rolling. Like they're just really, really good. Pettersson, Mikheyev, and Kuzmenko. So far this season, 3.6 expected goals for per 60 minutes. All the way up to 7 goals for actual goals for. A big problem, big part of that is that they're shooting like 20% of 5-on-5. But they are the line that's scoring for Vancouver at even strength. They're going to get that middle of the Montreal lineup, which Dvorak and Gallagher are fine, but you throw in Mike Hoffman, he's pretty bad defensively. Jonathan Drouin, Sean Monahan, Evgeny Dadonov, not going to be a very good defensive line, I don't think. So I do really like Vancouver too here. I think, their ownership, even if they come in at like 15%, that's fine. But it's another situation where I would still add a Quinn Hughes or a JT Miller or a Bo Horvat or something like that, even if I was playing the full Vancouver second line. So I don't think you have to put Vancouver 3. They are fine to use, but where they're coming in with basically the same ownership as Vancouver 1, I would treat them the same. Like if I do stack them, I would make sure to add more power play guys. So if people want to go back to that Montreal second line, I think that's fine, but you're right. Not a lot of minutes. I don't think you need a lot of minutes against Vancouver though. So I think, if you want to one-off Gallagher or something like that, I think that's perfectly acceptable. But I do like Vancouver power play Montreal 1 the most in this game. If you want to play Vancouver 1 or Vancouver 2, I would just make sure to add some additional power play guys. Just take advantage of that awful Montreal penalty kill.
Yeah, I kind of agree with the Bo Horvat call. If you throw enough spaghetti against the wall, eventually some of it's going to stick. But I do agree. I think Vancouver 3 is fine. Like Bo Horvat, Connor Garland, 2-man. You want to throw in, a Kuzmenko, something like that is fine. But like with their ownership pretty high for a third line, I'll just go up to that second line. They're going to get similar matchups, and they're just better. Like Ilya Mikheyev, not some, Joe Schmo. He's not going to hurt you up there. But if you want to leave him off, add in the JT Miller. You want to leave him off, add in, Horvat or Quinn Hughes. I think that's fine. Vancouver power play is probably my favorite thing from this game. I think going back to Montreal 1, also fine. Like, Vancouver is back-to-back on the road, and we can't understate how bad Thatcher Demko has been to start this season. He's been awful. Whether that continues for like 9-10% of Montreal 1, I'll take a couple stabs to find out. So let's move to the blue line. As we mentioned, Quinn Hughes, probably the guy there for Vancouver. Ethan Bear up to 3,700, but he's producing. I still think he's fine. Montreal's going 5 forwards on the power play. Why? Because Quadzilla Martin St. Louis said so. So really, there's just not much on the Montreal side that I want to play. Like David Savard, 5,300 is egregious.
Well, I mean, you say that, and he's going to go out and block 9 shots here tonight or something like that. Yeah, like I guarantee it. I will mention Joel Edmondson. I think he's still min-price on FanDuel. If you need a super cheap guy, I think that's fine. I kind of want to mention Jonathan Kovacevic. His last 3 games, he's played over 20 minutes in 2 of them. One of them was before Edmondson returned. One of them was after. Obviously, last night, as you mentioned, it was an overtime game. So that could have been factoring into it a little bit. He did have a couple overtime shifts, but even if he plays 19, 20 minutes for like 2,600 or whatever, I think that's palatable. Hughes in your power play stacks. He's still not shooting a lot. He said he was going to shoot more this year, and his shot attempt rate is basically the exact same. So not a lot of defensemen I really like. Tyler Myers is fine on DraftKings, I guess. Maybe he can throw his body in front of 3 shots for us here tonight.
Can never trust those sneaky little Hughes brothers. Full of crap. Anyway, in that, like I mentioned, Thatcher Demko been pretty bad this season, but both of these teams are back-to-back. Thatcher not getting a ton of ownership at AK. Beggars can't be choosers on this slate. I think you have to consider him. Samuel Montembeault, 7,400, one of the cheaper options going up against the Canucks team back-to-back on the road. I think you have to consider him as well. Does it feel good? Absolutely not, but I think both are in play.
Yeah, Montreal, one of the lowest shot volume teams in the league, but just above them is Vancouver. Like, neither of these teams shoot very much. If I had to take one, it would probably be Demko, because I'm much less concerned about the Montreal power play against Demko than I am the Vancouver power play against Montembeault.
I agree there. You just hope that. There you go. The dogs are in agreement. King Bacon Pie is in a tizzy. Anyway, college basketball is back, and we have you covered with Matt Kajeski's industry-leading college basketball DFS package. And we've got a deal to kick the season off. For just $1, you get your first week of college basketball DFS with promo code CBB is back, or click the link in the description. That's saving over 90% of the regular weekly price for college basketball. And included, you get projected fantasy points for every slate, player usage data, expert Discord chat, and King Bacon Pie giving you analysis on every game. So let's move on to the next one. We have the Pittsburgh Penguins with a 3.4 total heading into Washington. The Capitals have a 3.1. It's going to be Casey DeSmith against Darcy Kemper. All right. I think they have settled down there. Yeah, sorry if the dog scared you. I have a lot of them. Going to this game, again, Washington top line, I think the highest owned that we have projected of the night. I prefer the Pittsburgh side here. They're the most expensive line of the night, I believe. they're coming in almost only around 15%. Like Washington's going to be without Carlson, without Orlov, and without Oshie. They've struggled defensively. Their penalty kill hasn't been great. I like Pitt 1. I think the Washington side's fine with Casey DeSmith in that. I think it'd be some sort of power play stack.
Yeah. That the new Pittsburgh top line with Brian Rust there. You mentioned on the last show, it's kind of the old Pittsburgh top line because Rust was there a couple years ago. Very, very good numbers together. 2.8 expected goals for and over 1,200 minutes together, 5-on-5, 3.1 actual goals. They played it to a little bit of a higher pace over the last couple of years, which is actually kind of fine. I want more points and more shots from this team or from that line. And like, I don't really worry about the matchup here. Like, they're going to see a fair bit of the second and third lines from Washington because Washington doesn't send out Kuznetsov and Ovechkin against top lines or not very often. And like going up against Dylan Strome and Sonny Milano or, you know, Anthony Mantha and Nicholas Aube-Kubel, who was just taken off waivers and thrown on the third line. Those matchups don't scare me whatsoever. Going against that Pittsburgh top line, getting Jake Gensel back. You know, Pittsburgh, and all three guys are on the top power play as well. As you mentioned, the Washington penalty kill, not very good this year. The Pittsburgh top power play unit generating about 9.5 goals per 60 minutes. Just very, very good on the power play. Now, Washington doesn't take many penalties, about 3 a game, which is well below league average, but with a bad penalty kill, missing a lot of guys. Like, they're missing a full second line and their top pair. Like, a team can only suffer so many injuries. I really do like Pittsburgh 1 here. Like, I don't care if they're 20% owned tonight. I think they're by far the best line. Well, not by far, but I do think they're the best, easily the best line on this slate. They should come in with the highest ownership. Oddly enough, I think if you're going to leave one guy off to try to get a bit different, it would be Gensel. Rust has been shooting a lot this year, particularly at 5-on-5. It's his shot rate's up about 25% at 5-on-5 this year. So, like, if you feel like you want to get a bit different because you're super worried about, you know, playing a 20% line or something like that, I think leaving off Gensel would be the way to go. But as soon as I say that, like, you just know Gensel's going to double donk tonight.
That's the issue with the elite lines, right?
Yeah.
It's just miserable trying to pick one to leave off, so you just end up full stacking.
Yeah. I would probably just full stack and look to get different with my secondary and my defenseman and all that. But if you're going to leave one off, I was just thinking it would be Gensel. The Pittsburgh second line doesn't really have much of a sample together. You know, Malkin and Zucker do have a good sample without Brian Rust, going back a few years because Zucker's been there longer than Rickard Rakell. 250 minutes together, 2.7 goals for, 3.3 against. The defensive numbers for that Pittsburgh second line just not very good historically. Maybe they can kind of change things around this year. But that's what brings the Washington top line into play. And the Washington top line coming in with heavy ownership, about 20% on DraftKings, a little bit higher on FanDuel. But the Pittsburgh penalty kill hasn't been that great either. You know, Eric Gustafsson, we can make fun of him all we want, but he is a good power play defenseman. That's kind of the reason why he stayed in the league for the last 3 or 4 years, is that he can play, you know, 15, 16 minutes a night. I think he was up to 24 or something last game, but that was a lot of power play time. But he can play, you know, number 6, number 7 defense minutes, but still run a top power play unit. So, you know, if you're worried about ownership, you know, throw in another one of the power play guys on there, throw Dylan Strome or Marcus Johansson or something like that. But it is a good second line matchup for that Washington top line in this game. And Ovechkin's been shooting more at 5-on-5. That was the big problem with him through the first 7 or 8 games. He wasn't shooting that much at 5-on-5, at least not for him. But that has certainly turned itself around over the last few games, and he's brought himself back to close to his recent averages. So now that he's shooting more, Kuznetsov looked like he finally kind of broke through. I do like Washington 1. I don't know if I would go to Washington 2 again. Again, they're going to see a fair bit of that Pittsburgh top line. I don't think that's a very good matchup for them. So I don't know how Sonny Milano and Dylan Strome are going to be defensively. That seems a little bit concerning to me against that Pittsburgh one line. Anything can happen in a single hockey game, but it just seems like it's a prime matchup for Pittsburgh one and not Washington two. So where that Washington second line's not drawing a lot of ownership, like I think they're fine to use, but I don't know if I would just full 3-man stack them. It would end up some sort of power play stack. So it's either Washington 1 or Washington power play. Washington 3 is kind of interesting because I don't think the Pittsburgh third line is going to be very good. Assuming Jeff Carter's in, they officially said he's a game time decision, but it looks like he'll play. But him and Brock McGinn on the third line for the Penguins, below water by expected goal share, going back to last year in 175 minutes. McGinn, typically not a great defensive winger. Jeff Carter's defensive impacts have fallen off. Now he's like 37 years old or something like that. So I think, getting sneaky maybe with like a one-off Mantha or, even a one-off Lars Eller, I think it could be fine here on a short slate against what's not, I don't think is a strong Pittsburgh bottom six. But it's Pittsburgh 1, Washington 1 that I do kind of like most. If you want to turn that into Washington power play, go right ahead.
Yeah. And a point on Jeff Carter, he's 37. I'm 36. My defensive impacts are non-existent. So take that for what you will. Yeah, like I agree with your point on Washington too. I think, if you want to go Washington 1, leave off Sheary, add in a Mojo or Strome, I think that's fine. I definitely wouldn't full stack them, but Strome Johansson 2-man, if you want, cheap, lower owned exposure to a power play unit against a tough or a subpar PK, I think is fine. I just wouldn't full stack him. Moving to the blue line, Eric Gustafson, 3,200, still too cheap. Running that top power play, I think he is fine. Letang, 5,800. His woes have been priced in, I guess.
Have they?
Yeah, I don't know. Like he's had a decent peripherals his last 2 games, but that's a wildly short sample. Pierre-Olivier Joseph moving up to the second pair at 2,700. If you could tell me right now he'll see more than 14 minutes a night, I'll take a stab on him. Nick Jensen, Martin Fairvary, a little bit too expensive for me.
It's funny you say that because Fairvary's kind of the guy that I was going to point out. He's been getting more ice time, obviously, now with those guys injured, with Carlson and Orlov out. 23 minutes 2 games ago, 22 minutes on I think it was Sunday night against Edmonton. Maybe it was Monday night. But he has pretty good playmaking and transition data in his short career here. This is only his 3rd season, basically just his 2nd full season. But he had pretty good transition and playmaking data last year. He's still only 23 years old. So, I get that he's expensive, but he's also coming in with sub 1% ownership. Going to play 23 minutes for a team carrying a 3.1 total. I honestly don't mind him here tonight if you're not going to play double-digit percentage Gustafson or Trevor Van Riemsdyk getting 5% ownership. I don't see a huge difference between Van Riemsdyk and Fairvary, and where they're the same price and Fairvary is a small fraction of the ownership. I'd probably rather go in that direction.
That's a fair point.
It's a Fairvary point.
Yes. Wow. Whew. That dog segment into that. I'm just melting right now. But I think that's fine. I don't know. For what I'm doing tonight, which is an absolute scene, I can't afford Fairvary. So let's talk about the goalies in this game. Casey DeSmith, Darcy Kemper. I think Darcy Kemper is going to be the more popular one. He's more of a household name. Casey DeSmith, is he a massive downgrade from Yari? I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Just because you don't recognize the name doesn't mean they're not good. You know what I mean? So, I think my preferred option is Casey DeSmith in this game, just because I think Pittsburgh wins this game. Kemper does have a shot to see the saves bonus, though.
Yeah, that's kind of my only thing is I think Kemper could see a fair bit of shots here tonight. It's not projecting for a lot of shots against, but, we don't have any goalies at 30 projected saves either. So like if I had to pick one, I think it would be Kemper, but I honestly don't think this is a game where I'd be going to grab my goalies.
Yeah. I mean, there isn't a game where I'm going to grab my goalies on this slate, but this one especially, neither really inspire much confidence. So let's move to the last game of the night. We have the Minnesota Wild with a 3.5 total heading into Anaheim. The Ducks have a 2.9 total. Minnesota played last night with Marc-Andre Fleury, so Philip Gustafsson probable for the Wild. Ducks never say anything about their goalies. It honestly could be either one. I'm expecting Gibson, but would not be shocked if it was Stolarz. Minnesota 1, getting big ownership again. Minnesota 2, getting big ownership again. Ducks, awful defensively, have struggled mightily on the penalty kill. I think I'm going to be a broken record with the Wild, and it's going to be some sort of power play stack. On the Ducks side, I don't think Gustafsson's very good. Minnesota's been struggling a bit defensively. That second line fully correlates on the power play, Comtois, Strome, Terry. I think that's my preferred line, but I do like Zegras for Toronto as well.
Yeah. Do want to mention Adam Henrique. He's not going to be in the lineup tonight. They said he's missing it for the birth of his child. So congrats to him and the missus on that very special day. But then we're left – you're not going to get information about Anaheim. So now we're guessing who's going to end up playing with Zegras and Frank Vatrano. Like my guess is it's going to be Mason McTavish.
Yeah,
like who else would you move there? It's like Max Jones, like Jake Silverberg. I think it just makes more sense to move McTavish there and then move Lundestrom to the third line center. So that also opens up a spot on the top power play unit for McTavish, which Anaheim's power play is what it is, but getting top power play time for any team is better than getting none. So the Anaheim side's kind of interesting to me here. The Comtois, Strome and Terry line has some hilarious numbers in a small sample. Goals for plus goals again per 60 minutes of 5-on-5 is sitting at like 10, which is like they're just trading shots and goals back and forth. Now they've been pretty bad. They've been fine offensively with or without Comtois. It's just that small sample is throwing the expected goals against numbers out of whack. Comtois was a guy I had hopes for as a prospect, but he just hasn't turned into a whole lot. Like yesterday on the show, we were talking about guys that are just like shot bots. Like all they do is just shoot the puck, and that's, literally nothing else. At least they do that. So I'll say at least Comtois shoots the puck, but he doesn't really do a whole lot else. They're going to be going into that Minnesota second line quite a bit, Eriksson, Ek, and Boldy. Now, Eriksson, Ek, and Boldy actually have been pretty good defensively this year. And even going back to last year as well, with or without Kevin Fiala there. So, I'm not sure I would be running out to play the Strome, Terry, Comtois line. I would probably be more inclined to go with Vatrano, Zegras, and assuming it's Mason McTavish. You'll get Zegras and probably McTavish on the top power play unit. I think McTavish, because people are going to be guessing, I think he's going to come in, lower owned than he would if they were to announce right now that he's going to be playing on that line, right? So I don't mind them, and they're going to be going into the Minnesota top line a fair bit. Now, the top line definitely has been better with Freddie Gaudreau. They're better defensively, I should say, with Freddie Gaudreau. But they're not generating a whole lot offensively, so they're not really sustaining a lot of pressure, which means I think that Zegras, Vatrano, and McTavish can at least get some chances here tonight against the Minnesota top line. So that's kind of what I like here for Anaheim is the Vatrano, Zegras, McTavish trio, assuming McTavish is there. On the Minnesota side, I agree with you. I think it's just going back to a power play stack. Jordan Greenway's not playing tonight, by the way. So we'll have a new guy with Eriksson, Ek, and Boldy. I don't really know who it could be. It might be
probably.
That was the first guy that popped in my mind, but we've also seen Tyson Jost jump up. We've seen Marco Rossi jump up. I don't think it'll be that. I think it'll be Mason Shaw, like you said. So that could be another way to get a little bit different on a high owned line, is just really guessing that Shaw is going to be in the lineup for Minnesota. And where he's 3,100, if it is somebody different, if they do use Jost or if they do use Adam Beckman, who got recalled today, if it's somebody different, you can swap down to them. So yeah, I agree. I would just leave Shaw on the second line, and if it's somebody different, just swap out, and then you'll get a lower owned guy. But it is just Minnesota power play. Like the Anaheim penalty kill has been very, very bad this year, like amongst the worst in the NHL. They don't take a ton of penalties, but they are above average at 3.8 times shorthanded per game. And I think there are enough ways to get different with a Minnesota power play stack. Add in Addison, go with the triple winger, just full stack them. There are enough ways to get different to not worry about ownership. So Minnesota power play, Zegras, Vetrano, and probably Mason McTavish is what I like best. Agree
there. There's some interesting names on these in the bottom 6 of these teams that I really want to say, but I'm not going to. We'll move to the blue line here. John Klingberg running the top power play unit. He's 4,400. I guess he's fine. Cam Fowler plays like 25, 27 minutes at 2,900. Whether he does stuff with those minutes remains to be seen. But for 2,900, I'll take a stab. On the wild side, it's either going to be Addison, Spurgeon, or Brodin. Brodin's probably my favorite if you're not power play stacking. Other than that, I think that's about it.
One guy I'll mention besides what you did is Dmitry Kulikov. I think he's been playing a lot more minutes since Jamie Drysdale got hurt. And I think he's kind of in that Radko Guda spot where there are a couple defensemen that will be much higher owned than him. And if he can come in with, very low single-digit ownership, I would kind of take that risk for his price on either site. So I don't mind Kulikov as a differentiator here tonight.
Yep, and in net, neither of these goalies really inspire much confidence. But both of them you got to consider.
I mean, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I like half jokingly said in chat I might just lock in a $6,500 backup just to get the extra salary and hope all these goalies just get blown up. Like, it's certainly possible. There's like not one where I'm like, yeah, this guy's getting a shutout tonight. Like, all these goalies could give up 3 or more tonight.
Yeah, I mean, if you're telling me I have to play one of these guys, it's probably John Gibson, just because I want the volume. Anaheim just doesn't really shoot a lot, and Minnesota's been a little bit better defensively of late. So like Gustafsson might not see 25 shots or 30 shots or something like that here tonight. But if I'm playing one lineup, I don't think this is where I'm going to be getting my goalies from.
Yeah.
Not on DK anyway.
Yeah. And we'll just talk about all these goalies for a second. Like, for me, like, if you're not confident with anybody, and how can you ever be, really? But, like, if you don't have any leans, especially on this slate, I think you just side with cheaper and volume. So, like, Gibson, Darcy Kemper, Montembeault, like, you plug them in, you plug your nose, and hope they get the saves bonus, I think.
Yeah, Kemper is one of the 2 goalies I've circled for DraftKings just because I think, maybe Pittsburgh can put up like 39 shots or something like that here tonight. So don't mind Kemper on DK. But honestly, I think Spencer Knight is my favorite goalie on the slate here. He's probably not going to have a ton of ownership, like 10 to 15% maybe. And like I said, his only problem has been on the penalty kill. As long as he doesn't get blown up on the PK, I think he could have a good game against Carolina.
Yeah. I think there's not one goalie that I would not consider. So there's
that is the other way of putting it. I think, it's the old quarterback problem. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you have 9. Well, here we have 8 goalies. So just go with one of them.
Spin a wheel, flip a coin. I don't know. Like, I wish I could tell you otherwise. Like, goalie's a wasteland. Who's your hat trick pick tonight?
I'm going a little bit freaky and a kind of a tough matchup, but I'm going Anton Lundell.
We love it. I'm a big Anton Lundell slappy. Is he in my lineup? I don't know yet. I hope so. He might be. He might not be. My hat trick pick's going to be Evgeny Malkin.
There we go. Gino's been off to a good start this year, man. Point per game, pretty good shot, scoring chance impacts. Hopefully you can do it.
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to avoid a top line guy, because like the top lines are fairly obvious tonight. So I like Malkin top power play. So for producer Slim Cliffy. I'm your host, Josh Harris. Coming up after us, what do we have after us? I wrote this down. Please hold. Coming up after us, we have the NBA Deeper Dive at 4:45 with Greg and Adam. NBA Live Before Lock with Josh and Eric at 6. Make sure to check that out if you're playing NBA tonight. I know a lot of you guys tuned into the NHL Live Before Lock, not realizing there wasn't any NBA, but I appreciate you guys tuning in yesterday. It was a lot of fun. So for Slim Cliffy, I'm your host, Josh Harris. We will see you tomorrow for a big NHL slate. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck tonight, everyone.